I'm Emma, your host for today. If you're new here, I'd like to tell you that we upload a brand new English learning video every single day to help you improve your English faster and more confidently in real life. In today's masterclass, you're not only going to improve your English listening skills, but you're also going to build stronger speaking confidence through advanced daily life conversation practice. Today, we're diving into an important and powerful topic that will take your fluency to the next level. B1 to B2 Level Daily Life English Conversations Practice, where you'll learn how to express yourself more naturally using advanced English phrases in real-world situations. We'll go through realistic daily life conversations, situations you face at home, at work, in social settings, and in everyday interactions. You'll hear natural sentence flow, advanced phrase usage, and practical speaking patterns that fluent English speakers use every day. Along the way, I'll guide you through comprehension moments and speaking practice so you can actively build your fluency while listening. Whether you're sharing your experiences, giving opinions, handling responsibilities, solving problems, or simply having casual conversations, this lesson will help you sound more confident, more expressive, and more fluent. By the end of this masterclass, you'll have a stronger command of advanced daily life English and feel more comfortable communicating in longer, more natural conversations. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel and press the bell icon if you want to keep learning with more advanced English practice sessions like this. So, take a deep breath, focus your mind, and let's begin building your advanced English fluency together. Chuang Ti Ding Duan, Chuang Ti Di Duan. As you continue building your English fluency, one of the most important transitions you begin to notice is the shift from basic sentence construction to more layered, expressive communication. At the B1 to B2 level, this shift becomes especially powerful because you are no longer just describing actions. You are explaining reasons, sharing perspectives, adding emotional nuance, and connecting ideas in a way that sounds natural and confident. This is where daily life conversation practice becomes essential, because real fluency is not built through isolated vocabulary. It is built through repeated exposure to meaningful, relatable situations that require you to think, respond, and express yourself more fully. Imagine starting your day, and someone asks you, "How's your morning been so far?" At a beginner level, you might say, "Good." But at your current level, we expand that response into something more natural and more descriptive. You might say, "It's been quite productive so far. I managed to finish a few important tasks before breakfast, so I feel pretty accomplished already." Notice how phrases like "quite productive," "managed to finish," and "feel pretty accomplished" instantly make your speech sound more advanced and conversational. These are the kinds of expressions we will practice throughout this session. Now let's move into a guided speaking moment. I want you to imagine you're talking to a colleague or a friend, and they ask about your day. Listen first, then repeat after me, mentally or aloud. My morning started off a bit hectic. I had several things to take care of, but once I organized my schedule, everything began to fall into place. Again, My morning started off a bit hectic. I had several things to take care of, but once I organized my schedule, everything began to fall into place. This kind of response shows control over time expressions, emotional tone, and cause and effect structure. As your conversations continue, people often ask follow-up questions. For example, what kept you so busy? Instead of giving a short answer, you can expand using detail connectors. I was tied up with back-to-back meetings, and on top of that, I had to handle a few unexpected issues that came up at the last minute. Notice the advanced phrases here: tied up, back-to-back, on top of that, and came up at the last minute. These expressions are extremely common in fluent daily English and help your speech sound spontaneous rather than rehearsed. Let's practice another situational response. Imagine you're explaining why you felt stressed yesterday. Listen. To be honest, yesterday was a bit overwhelming. I was juggling multiple responsibilities, and it felt like everything needed my attention at the same time. Now repeat. Yesterday was a bit overwhelming. I was juggling multiple responsibilities, and it felt like everything needed my attention at the same time. This structure allows you to communicate emotional pressure without sounding too simple or repetitive. Daily conversations also involve talking about plans, not just what you did, but what you intend to do. For example, if someone asks, "Do you have anything planned for this evening?" you could respond, "I'm planning to unwind a little. I've been meaning to catch up on a series I started, and I might also go for a short walk to clear my mind." Notice the fluency markers: planning to unwind, been meaning to, catch up on, and clear my mind. These phrases communicate relaxation and intention naturally. Now let's move into an interactive practice scenario. Imagine you're talking to a friend after work. I'll guide the situation, and you respond mentally using the model provided. Your friend says, "You look tired today. Long day?" You respond, "Yeah, it's been quite demanding. I had to meet a tight deadline, so I was fully focused the entire afternoon." Again, "It's been quite demanding. I had to meet a tight deadline, so I was fully focused the entire afternoon." This response shows descriptive intensity without overcomplication. At the B1 to B2 level, storytelling also becomes an important fluency builder. You're expected to narrate experiences with sequencing language. For example, something interesting happened on my way to work today. I ran into an old friend I hadn't seen in years. We ended up talking for almost half an hour, and it really made my morning feel special. Notice how phrases like ran into, ended up talking, and made my morning feel special add emotional storytelling depth. Let's practice expanding short stories. Listen first. I tried a new restaurant yesterday, and honestly, it exceeded my expectations. The atmosphere was cozy, the service was attentive, and the food was absolutely worth the visit. Now repeat. It exceeded my expectations. The service was attentive, and it was absolutely worth the visit. These descriptive layers are essential for conversational richness. Conversations also require you to express opinions diplomatically, especially in social or professional contexts. For instance, if someone asks whether you liked a movie, instead of saying no, you could say, "It wasn't exactly my cup of tea, but I can see why others might enjoy it." This shows disagreement while maintaining politeness. Let's practice opinion softening. I wouldn't say I disliked it, but I felt the storyline could have been more engaging. Repeat. I wouldn't say I disliked it, but I felt the storyline could have been more engaging. This type of phrasing is common in fluent conversational English. Now imagine a casual weekend conversation. Someone asks, "How did you spend your weekend?" A fluent response might sound like this: "I kept things pretty low-key, caught up on some rest, did a bit of cleaning, and spent some quality time with family." Notice phrases like kept things low-key, caught up on rest, and quality time, all widely used in natural speech. Let's build a longer weekend narrative. I had been looking forward to the weekend all week, so I decided to disconnect from work completely. I went out for dinner, explored a new part of the city, and just allowed myself to recharge. This structure shows anticipation, action, and emotional outcome. As you progress in fluency, you also learn to handle unexpected situations conversationally. For example, I was supposed to meet a client yesterday, but the meeting got postponed at the last minute, so I used the extra time to prepare more thoroughly. Notice how rescheduling language works naturally here. Practice this response. The plan fell through, but it gave me a chance to focus on other priorities. Again, the plan fell through, but it gave me a chance to focus on other priorities. This demonstrates flexibility in communication. Another common daily conversation theme involves giving updates. For example, "How's your project going?" You might respond, "It's coming along well. I've made significant progress this week, and I'm starting to see everything come together." Phrases like "coming along well" and "see everything come together" indicate forward momentum. Now, let's practice emotional expression linked with achievement. I felt a real sense of accomplishment after completing it, especially because it had been challenging at the start. Repeat that structure mentally to internalize achievement language. As conversations deepen, people often discuss balance between work and personal life. You might say, "Lately, I've been trying to strike a better balance between my professional responsibilities and personal well-being." This shows abstract fluency, typical of B2 speakers. Practice expansion. I realized I was burning out, so I started setting clearer boundaries and making time to recharge. Notice the psychological vocabulary integration. Before we move further, let's do one extended fluency drill. Imagine someone asks you to summarize your week. You respond, "This week has been a mix of challenges and small wins. I had a demanding workload, but I managed to stay organized. I also made time for myself in the evenings, which helped me stay grounded and focused." Repeat internally, focusing on pacing and emotional tone. As you continue strengthening your conversational range, another important area of fluency development comes from learning how to describe routines with variation rather than repetition. At the B1 to B2 level, it's not enough to say what you do. You begin to explain how you do it, why you do it, and how it affects your day emotionally and mentally. This layered communication is what transforms everyday English into advanced daily life fluency. Imagine someone asking you, "What does a typical weekday look like for you?" Instead of giving a short, mechanical response, you expand naturally. You might say, "My weekdays usually start fairly early. I like to give myself enough time to wake up properly, rather than rushing straight into work. I'll have a quiet breakfast, check my priorities for the day, and mentally prepare for what lies ahead. Notice the phrases, wake up properly, check my priorities, and mentally prepare. These expressions create a more reflective and fluent tone. Let's move into guided practice. Listen first. I try to ease into my mornings, instead of overwhelming myself right away. It helps me stay focused and keeps my energy steady throughout the day. Now repeat that flow, mentally or aloud, focusing on the rhythm of ease into my mornings and keeps my energy steady. These are natural fluency markers. As conversations progress, people often talk about productivity habits. For example, how do you stay productive during busy weeks? A developed response could sound like this. I rely heavily on planning ahead. I break large tasks into smaller steps, which makes everything feel more manageable and less intimidating. Notice, planning ahead, break tasks into steps, and less intimidating. These are advanced structuring phrases. Now practice expanding that idea. Whenever I feel overwhelmed, I pause for a moment, reorganize my priorities, and focus on one thing at a time. Repeat. I pause for a moment, reorganize my priorities, and focus on one thing at a time. This sequence language strengthens conversational clarity. Another daily life conversation theme involves commuting or travel routines. Someone might ask, how's your commute these days? Instead of saying, long, you expand. It's a bit time-consuming, but I've started using that time more productively. I listen to podcasts, respond to messages, or sometimes just reflect quietly before the day begins. Notice how fluency grows through added perspective. Practice this commuting reflection. At first, I found the raw commute exhausting, but over time, I learned to turn it into personal time rather than wasted time. Again, turn it into personal time rather than wasted time. This contrast framing is common in fluent speech. Now let's shift to workplace social interaction. Imagine a colleague asking, how are you finding the new project? You could respond, it's been quite engaging so far. It's pushed me out of my comfort zone, but I appreciate the opportunity to develop new skills. Notice phrases like, pushed me out of my comfort zone and develop new skills. These show professional conversational maturity. Let's practice emotional reflection in work settings. I was initially hesitant, but once I got involved, I realized how much I could grow from the experience. Repeat that flow, focusing on initially hesitant and grow from the experience. Daily conversations also involve problem sharing, especially when discussing challenges. For example, I've been dealing with a few technical issues lately, nothing too serious, but they've slowed down my progress. This type of response communicates difficulty without sounding overly negative. Practice expansion. It's been a learning curve, but I'm gradually figuring things out. Repeat. It's been a learning curve, but I'm gradually figuring things out. This shows resilience language. Let's move into social life conversations. Someone asks, have you been staying connected with friends recently? A fluent answer might be, I've been trying to make more of an effort, even with busy schedules. We've been checking in, meeting occasionally, and keeping the connection alive. Notice, make more of an effort, and keep the connection alive. Now practice a reflective version. I realized how important those connections are, so I've been prioritizing them more intentionally. This introduces emotional awareness into conversation. Another important B1 to B2 skill involves describing personal growth. For example, I've become more confident speaking English over the past few months. I'm not perfect, but I'm far more comfortable expressing myself than I used to be. This structure shows progress acknowledgement. Practice this growth narrative. I still make mistakes from time to time, but I no longer let them hold me back from speaking. Repeat slowly, focusing on emotional confidence. Let's explore decision-making conversations. Someone asks, "What made you decide to improve your English seriously?" You could respond, "I reached a point where I realized English was limiting my opportunities, so I decided to commit fully and practice consistently." Notice, reached a point and commit fully, practice, expansion. Once I saw progress, it motivated me to stay disciplined and keep improving. This shows cause and motivation fluency. Now imagine discussing lifestyle adjustments. I've been trying to adopt healthier routines lately, not just physically, but mentally as well. This introduces holistic vocabulary. Practice deeper explanation. I've started setting aside time to relax, reflect, and disconnect from daily stress. Repeat, disconnect from daily stress. A common conversational phrase. At this level, giving advice becomes part of natural conversation. For example, if you're trying to stay consistent, I'd recommend setting realistic goals rather than overwhelming yourself. Notice the advisory tone. Practice another advisory structure. What worked for me was building small habits first, then gradually increasing the challenge. Repeat that structure. Now let's move into an extended guided conversation simulation. Imagine someone asking you about balancing responsibilities. You respond, "It hasn't always been easy. There were times when I felt stretched too thin, but I learned to prioritize what truly mattered and let go of unnecessary pressure." Repeat internally, focusing on emotional authenticity. Continue the response. Over time, I've become better at managing my energy rather than just managing my time. This contrast phrase is advanced conversational framing. Daily English fluency also involves reacting to surprises. For example, I wasn't expecting the opportunity, but I decided to take a chance and see where it would lead. Notice, take a chance, and see where it would lead. Practice a reflective follow-up. Looking back, I'm glad I stepped out of my comfort zone. Repeat that emotional reflection. Now let's practice a longer storytelling drill, combining multiple fluency elements. This month has been quite transformative for me. I took on responsibilities I once felt unprepared for, faced challenges that tested my patience, and discovered strengths I didn't realize I had. It hasn't been easy, but it's been incredibly rewarding. Repeat mentally with me, focusing on pacing and emotional weight. As your fluency expands, you also become comfortable discussing future direction. For example, moving forward, I want to focus more on personal growth while maintaining professional stability. Notice the balance framing. Practice expansion. I'm not rushing the process. I'm allowing progress to unfold naturally. Repeat slowly. Before we continue, let's do one integrated fluency rehearsal. Imagine summarizing your personal development journey. I've come a long way from where I started. There were moments of doubt, frustration, and hesitation, but consistency made the difference. Now I feel more capable, more confident, and more willing to express myself without fear. Repeat internally, focusing on emotional clarity and speech rhythm. As your fluency continues to expand, another powerful dimension of daily life, English conversations begins to open up, and that is the ability to handle longer social interactions with comfort and flexibility. At the B1 to B2 level, conversations are no longer limited to exchanging basic information. Instead, they become opportunities to build rapport, express personality, and sustain dialogue naturally without running out of things to say. This is where conversational flow becomes just as important as vocabulary itself. Imagine you meet someone after a long time, and they say, "It's been ages since we last spoke. What have you been up to?" A fluent response would go beyond simply listing activities. You might say, "You're right. It really has been a while. Life's been keeping me on my toes lately. I've been focusing a lot on work, but I've also been trying to make space for personal growth and new experiences." Notice how phrases like "keeping me on my toes," "focusing a lot on," and "make space for" create conversational depth. Let's move into guided practice. Listen first. I've been going through a phase of self-improvement, trying to learn new skills, and step outside my comfort zone whenever I can. Now repeat mentally, paying attention to the natural rhythm of going through a phase and step outside my comfort zone. These expressions frequently appear in fluent social dialogue. Social conversations often involve asking and answering about life changes. Someone might ask, "Have there been any major changes in your life recently?" A developed answer could be, "I wouldn't say major changes, but there have definitely been meaningful shifts in my priorities. I've started valuing balance and mental clarity much more than before." Notice the softening phrase, "I wouldn't say major," followed by reflective elaboration. Practice expanding that response. "I've become more intentional about how I spend my time and who I invest my energy in." Repeat slowly, focusing on the words intentional and invest my energy. These abstract conversational phrases are key at this level. Let's transition into everyday service interactions, something you experience frequently in daily life. For instance, imagine you're at a cafe and the staff member asks, "What can I get for you today?" A simple response would work, but a more fluent response sounds like, "I'm in the mood for something warm and comforting. I think I'll go with a cappuccino and maybe a light snack on the side." Notice the phrases, "in the mood for," and "on the side." Now practice a situational variation. "I'm actually trying to cut back on sugar, so I'll stick to something simple today." Repeat, "trying to cut back on," and "stick to something simple." These are practical lifestyle phrases. Daily conversations also involve handling small inconveniences politely. Imagine receiving the wrong order. You might say, "Excuse me, I think there's been a slight mix-up with my order. I actually requested it without milk." Notice how slight mix-up softens the complaint. Practice another polite correction. I don't mind waiting a little longer. I just wanted to clarify the request. Repeat, focusing on calm tone and clarity. Now let's explore conversations about time management. Someone asks, how do you manage to stay organized with so much going on? You could respond, I've had to develop systems that keep me on track. Otherwise, it's easy to feel scattered and unproductive. Notice the phrases, keep me on track, and feel scattered. Practice deeper explanation. I rely on structured routines, but I also leave room for flexibility when unexpected things arise. Repeat that balance framing slowly. At the B1 to B2 level, expressing mental states becomes more nuanced. For example, lately, I've been feeling mentally drained, not because of one big issue, but because of the accumulation of small pressures. Notice, mentally drained, and accumulation of small pressures. Practice reflective continuation. So, I've been making a conscious effort to slow down and reset when needed. Repeat slowly. Now imagine discussing motivation. Someone asks, what keeps you motivated when things get difficult? A fluent response might sound like, I remind myself why I started in the first place. Reconnecting with that purpose helps me push through temporary setbacks. Notice, push through setbacks. Practice expansion. I've learned that motivation comes and goes, but discipline keeps you moving forward. Repeat internally, with steady pacing. Let's move into conversations about learning and skill development. Someone asks, how's your English progress going? You might respond, it's been a gradual journey, but I can definitely see improvement, especially in how confidently I express my thoughts now. Notice gradual journey and express my thoughts confidently. Practice deeper reflection. I've shifted my focus from perfection to communication, and that mindset change made a huge difference. Repeat that mindset framing calmly. Daily English also includes reacting to compliments. Imagine someone says, your English sounds really fluent these days. A natural response could be, I really appreciate that. I've been putting in consistent effort, so it's encouraging to hear that it's paying off. Notice, putting in consistent effort and paying off. Practice a humble response variation. I still have a long way to go, but I'm proud of the progress I've made so far. Repeat, with calm pacing. Let's now explore planning conversations. Someone asks, do you have any goals you're working toward right now? You could respond, yes, I'm focusing on strengthening both my communication skills and my confidence in real-life interactions. Notice the dual goal structuring. Practice expansion. I want to reach a point where expressing myself in English feels completely natural. Repeat, slowly. Now let's enter an extended situational role play, designed to stretch your fluency endurance. Imagine you're discussing personal growth with a friend. I've been reflecting a lot on how much I've changed over the past year. I've become more patient with myself, more willing to embrace challenges, and less afraid of making mistakes. That shift in mindset has helped me grow, not only in language, but in life overall. Repeat internally with me. Continue the response. There were moments when progress felt slow, and I questioned whether my efforts were enough. But staying consistent eventually built the confidence I was searching for. Notice the emotional resilience language. Now let's practice reacting to unexpected opportunities. Someone says, "You should apply for that opportunity." You respond, "I've been considering it." Part of me feels excited, while another part feels slightly intimidated. But I know growth usually comes from stepping into the unknown. Repeat that contrast structure. Daily, conversations often circle back to emotional balance. For example, I've been trying to protect my peace more intentionally, avoiding unnecessary stress whenever possible. Notice, protect my peace. Practice deeper reflection. Not every situation deserves my energy, and learning that has been freeing. Repeat, slowly. Before we continue, let's do one extended fluency consolidation drill, combining social interaction, reflection, and growth language. Lately, life has been teaching me the importance of balance, balancing ambition with rest, productivity with mindfulness, and responsibility with personal well-being. I'm still learning, still adjusting, but I feel more aligned with the direction I'm heading. Repeat internally, focusing on emotional pacing and conversational calmness. As your conversational confidence continues to evolve, you begin to notice how fluency is not only about expressing positive or neutral experiences, but also about navigating misunderstandings, disagreements, and emotionally sensitive conversations with clarity and composure. At the B1 to B2 level, handling these situations gracefully becomes a defining marker of advanced communication, because real daily life conversations are not always smooth. They require patience, tone awareness, and thoughtful phrasing. Imagine you're in a workplace discussion and a colleague says something you don't fully agree with. Instead of responding abruptly, you might say, "I see where you're coming from, and I understand your perspective, but I have a slightly different take on the situation." Notice how "I see where you're coming from" softens the disagreement, while keeping the conversation respectful. Let's practice this diplomatic structure. "I respect your point of view, though I interpret the situation a little differently." Repeat, mentally, focusing on calm delivery rather than a defensive tone. Now imagine a scenario where there has been a misunderstanding. Someone says, "I thought you were handling that task." You respond, "I think there may have been a bit of miscommunication. I was under the impression that it had been reassigned." Notice phrases like "bit of miscommunication" and "under the impression." These prevent blame escalation. Practice a clarification follow-up. Let's go over the details together so we can make sure we're aligned moving forward. Repeat that collaboration language, slowly. Daily life also involves apologizing sincerely when needed. For example, "I want to apologize if my response earlier came across as dismissive. That certainly wasn't my intention." Notice how intention clarification softens impact. Practice another apology variation. "I realize I could have communicated that more clearly, and I appreciate your patience." Repeat slowly, with sincerity. Now, let's explore receiving criticism constructively. Someone says, "I think the presentation could have been more structured." A fluent response might be, "Thank you for the feedback. I can see how improving the structure would make the message clearer." Notice how acknowledgement replaces defensiveness. Practice growth-oriented acceptance. "I'll definitely take that into account." for future improvements. Repeat that future-focused language. Let's move into emotionally supportive conversations. Imagine a friend sharing stress. You respond, "That sounds incredibly overwhelming. I can only imagine how much pressure you've been under." Notice the empathetic phrasing and gentle tone. Practice supportive continuation. "If there's anything I can do to help lighten the load, please don't hesitate to let me know." Repeat internally with warmth. Daily English fluency also includes offering reassurance. For example, "You've handled difficult situations before. I'm confident you'll navigate this one as well." Notice the encouragement language. Practice reassurance expansion. Sometimes we underestimate our own resilience, especially when we're in the middle of the struggle. Repeat slowly, allowing the words to breathe. Now imagine discussing conflict resolution. You might say, "I think it would be helpful if we addressed the issue openly rather than letting frustration build up." Notice the phrase, "address the issue openly." Practice calm resolution language. My goal isn't to assign blame, but to find a solution that works for both of us. Repeat mentally, with steady pacing. Let's explore boundary-setting conversations. Someone keeps requesting your time. You respond, "I genuinely want to support you, but I also need to manage my current workload responsibly." Notice the balanced phrasing. Practice boundary expansion. "Perhaps we can revisit this once my schedule becomes more flexible." Repeat calmly, without guilt. At the B1 to B2 level, expressing emotional honesty becomes more refined. For example, "I'll be honest. I felt slightly discouraged when the plan didn't work out, but I'm trying to focus on what I can learn from it." Notice emotional acknowledgement, followed by resilience. Practice reflective growth language. Every setback carries a lesson, even if it's not immediately obvious. Repeat slowly, with reflection. Now imagine discussing teamwork. Someone asks, "How was the collaboration experience?" You respond, "Overall, it was very constructive. We had different viewpoints, but that diversity actually strengthened the final outcome." Notice the collaborative positivity. Practice expansion. "It challenged me to think beyond my usual approach." Repeat that adaptability phrasing. Let's move into managing pressure conversations. For example, "Deadlines have been quite intense lately, but I've been doing my best to stay composed and solution-focused." Notice the phrase, "stay composed." Practice resilience framing. Pressure tends to reveal our strengths if we handle it mindfully. Repeat internally, with confidence. Daily conversations also involve discussing mistakes. For instance, "I made an error in the initial report, but I took immediate steps to correct it and prevent it from happening again." Notice the accountability language. Practice responsible reflection. "It was a learning moment rather than a failure." Repeat slowly, with maturity. Now let's explore giving constructive feedback. You might say, "I really appreciate the effort you put in. One small suggestion that might enhance it further is refining the opening section." Notice praise. Before critique, practice diplomatic suggestion. "It's already strong. This adjustment would simply elevate it." Repeat mentally, with encouragement. Let's transition into emotionally complex storytelling. Imagine sharing a challenging experience. "There was a time when I doubted my abilities quite deeply, I felt like I was falling behind, while everyone else was moving ahead. But that period forced me to confront my insecurities and rebuild my confidence. Step by step, repeat internally, in calm segments. Continue the reflection. It wasn't an overnight transformation. It required patience, persistence, and a willingness to forgive my own mistakes. Notice the emotional healing language. Now let's practice discussing personal values in conversation. Someone asks, "What matters most to you now?" You might respond, "At this stage in my life, I value inner peace, meaningful growth, and authentic connections, far more than external validation." Repeat slowly, with clarity. Practice deeper value articulation. I've realized that fulfillment comes from alignment rather than achievement alone. Repeat internally, with intention. Before we continue, let's complete an extended emotional fluency drill, combining empathy, reflection, and resolution language. I've learned that communication isn't just about speaking clearly, it's about listening with intention, responding with empathy, and creating space for mutual understanding. When conversations are approached with patience rather than ego, they become opportunities for growth rather than conflict. Repeat mentally, focusing on calm, steady pacing. As your conversational fluency continues to mature, another essential layer of daily life English emerges, and that is the ability to navigate decision-making, conversations with clarity, reasoning, and emotional balance. At the B1 to B2 level, you're no longer just stating what you will do. You're explaining why you're choosing a certain path, weighing alternatives, and expressing hesitation, confidence, or reflection in a natural conversational tone. Imagine someone asking you, "How did you decide to take on that responsibility?" A fluent response might sound like this. "At first, I was hesitant. I wasn't entirely sure whether I was ready for the challenge, but after thinking it through, I realized it was an opportunity I didn't want to let pass me by." Notice phrases like "thinking it through" and "let pass me by." These expressions communicate thoughtful decision-making. Let's move into guided speaking practice. Listen first. I weighed the pros and cons carefully and ultimately decided that the potential growth outweighed my fears. Now repeat mentally or aloud, focusing on "weighed the pros and cons" and "outweighed my fears." These are powerful conversational structures. Daily life conversations often include discussing missed opportunities. For example, looking back, I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I had taken that chance earlier. Notice the reflective conditional phrasing. Practice expansion. At the time, I lacked the confidence, but now I realize I was more capable than I believed. Repeat slowly, paying attention to emotional reflection. Now imagine discussing future possibilities. Someone asks, "Where do you see yourself heading next?" You might respond, "I'm still exploring my direction, but I know I want to continue developing both professionally and personally." Notice the open-ended framing. Practice deeper future articulation. I'm focusing less on rushing outcomes and more on building sustainable progress. Repeat internally. Let's shift into financial and lifestyle decision conversations. Someone asks, "Have you been making any changes to your spending habits?" A fluent response could sound like, "Yes, I've been trying to become more mindful of where my money goes." prioritizing long-term stability over short-term indulgence. Notice mindful of where my money goes. Practice reflective continuation. It's about creating security while still allowing space for enjoyment. Repeat slowly. At the B1 to B2 level, discussing risk becomes more nuanced. For example, taking risks used to intimidate me, but I've started viewing them as calculated steps rather than reckless decisions. Notice calculated steps. Practice expansion. Growth rarely happens within the boundaries of comfort. Repeat internally. Now imagine planning a major life step. Someone asks, "Are you thinking about making any big changes this year?" You might say, "I am considering a few possibilities. Nothing finalized yet, but I'm keeping myself open to transitions that align with my long-term vision." Notice open to transitions and align with my vision. Practice reflective addition. I don't want to rush the process. I want my decisions to feel grounded and intentional. Repeat slowly. Let's move into conversations about priorities. Someone asks, "What's your main focus right now?" A fluent answer could be, "My main focus is creating balance, ensuring that my ambitions don't come at the expense of my well-being." Notice the contrast structure. Practice expansion. I've learned that success feels hollow if it costs you your peace. Repeat internally. Daily English conversations also involve comparing past and present mindsets. For example, a few years ago, I was constantly chasing validation. Now I'm more focused on personal fulfillment. Notice the transformation framing. Practice deeper reflection. My definition of success has evolved significantly over time. Repeat slowly. Now let's enter a guided situational role play centered on decision pressure. Imagine someone encouraging you to make a quick choice. You respond, "I understand the urgency, but I prefer to evaluate all aspects before committing. I want to make sure the decision aligns with both my values and long-term goals." Repeat mentally, focusing on calm assertiveness. Continue the response. Rushed decisions often create complications later, so I'd rather proceed thoughtfully than impulsively. Notice contrast reasoning language. Let's explore conversations around opportunity evaluation. Someone asks, "What made you accept the offer?" You might say, "It wasn't just the opportunity itself, it was the environment, the growth potential, and the alignment with where I see myself." Heading. Repeat slowly. Practice elaboration. I look beyond immediate benefits and consider long-term impact. Repeat internally. Now imagine discussing sacrifices linked to decisions. For example, pursuing this path required me to step away from certain comforts, but I knew the temporary discomfort would lead to meaningful progress. Notice emotional trade-off phrasing. Practice reflection. Sometimes you have to let go of familiarity to embrace transformation. Repeat slowly. At this fluency level, expressing uncertainty gracefully is equally important. For instance, "I don't have all the answers yet, but I'm learning to trust the process as it unfolds." Notice trust the process. Practice continuation. Clarity often comes through action rather than overthinking. Repeat internally. Let's shift into conversations about advice related to decision-making. Someone asks, "How do you handle difficult choices?" You could respond, "I try to distance myself emotionally at first, so I can evaluate the situation objectively." Notice distance myself emotionally. Practice expansion. Once I gain clarity, I reintroduce intuition into the decision. Repeat slowly. Now let's move into a longer storytelling drill, combining hesitation, evaluation, and outcome reflection. There was a time when I stood at a crossroads, uncertain which direction would lead to growth. I spent weeks reflecting, seeking guidance, and analyzing possibilities. Eventually, I chose the path that challenged me the most, and although it was intimidating, it became one of the most defining decisions of my journey. Repeat internally in paced segments. Continue. It taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the willingness to move forward despite it. Notice philosophical conversational layering. Daily life fluency also includes discussing adaptability. For example, not every decision unfolds as planned, but adaptability allows you to reshape outcomes rather than regret them. Repeat slowly. Practice reinforcement. Flexibility turns obstacles into learning experiences. Repeat internally. Before we continue, let's complete an extended integrated fluency rehearsal centered on decision awareness. I've realized that every choice we make shapes the direction of our lives. Some decisions feel effortless, others carry weight and uncertainty, but each one contributes to growth in its own way. Learning to choose thoughtfully, act courageously, and reflect honestly has transformed how I approach both challenges and opportunities. Repeat mentally, focusing on pacing and emotional resonance. As your conversational depth continues to grow, another powerful fluency dimension begins to develop, and that is your ability to talk about experiences, not just what happened, but how those moments shaped your perspective, emotions, and personal growth. At the B1 to B2 level, storytelling becomes more descriptive, more reflective, and more immersive, because fluent speakers don't simply narrate events, they bring listeners into the experience itself. Imagine someone asking you, "Have you had any memorable experiences recently?" Instead of giving a brief answer, you might respond, "Yes, actually, I had an experience not too long ago that really shifted my outlook. It wasn't dramatic on the surface, but it left a lasting impression on how I approach challenges." Notice the reflective framing. You're building anticipation before revealing details. Let's move into guided speaking practice. Listen first. It started as an ordinary situation, but it gradually turned into a meaningful learning moment. Now, repeat mentally or aloud, focusing on gradually turned into and meaningful learning moment. These transitions help structure engaging storytelling. Now imagine sharing a travel-related experience. Someone asks, "What was the most interesting place you've visited?" A fluent response could sound like, "One place that truly stood out to me was a quiet coastal town I visited last year. The pace of life there was slower, more intentional, and it gave me the chance to disconnect from routine pressures." Notice descriptive pacing and emotional layering. Practice expansion. I found myself appreciating small moments, like early morning walks and uninterrupted silence. Repeat slowly. Travel conversations often involve contrast reflection. For example, "Coming back from that trip made me realize how fast-paced my daily life had become." Notice realization language. Practice continuation. "It encouraged me to integrate more calmness into my routine." Repeat. Internally, Let's move into conversations about trying something new. Someone asks, "Have you stepped outside your comfort zone lately?" You might respond, "Yes. I recently challenged myself to try something I'd been postponing for years, and although I felt nervous at first, the outcome was incredibly rewarding." Notice hesitation, follow G reward framing, practice reflective elaboration. Fear often exaggerates difficulty, but action reduces it. Repeat slowly. Daily life conversations also include sharing learning experiences. For example, I attended a workshop recently that changed how I approach communication. It emphasized listening just as much as speaking. Notice insight-based storytelling. Practice continuation. I walked away with practical strategies that I've already started applying. Repeat internally. Now imagine discussing a challenging experience. Someone asks, "What's been one of your toughest moments recently?" A fluent response might sound like, "There was a period when everything felt uncertain. I was navigating multiple responsibilities while trying to maintain emotional balance." Notice emotional layering. Practice deeper reflection. It tested my patience, but it also strengthened my resilience. Repeat slowly. At this level, storytelling often includes lessons learned. For example, that experience taught me the importance of slowing down before reacting and choosing thoughtful responses over impulsive ones. Notice wisdom extraction, practice expansion. Growth often emerges from discomfort. Repeat internally. Let's shift into conversations about achievements. Someone asks, "What accomplishment are you most proud of lately?" You might respond, "I'm proud of the progress I've made in staying consistent, especially during periods when motivation was low." Notice internal, achievement focus, practice continuation. Discipline carried me through moments when enthusiasm faded. Repeat slowly. Now imagine narrating a day that didn't go as planned. A fluent description could sound like, "I had mapped out my day carefully, but unexpected events kept disrupting my schedule. At first, it felt frustrating, but I eventually adapted and made the most of the situation." Notice adaptability storytelling. Practice reflective ending. Sometimes flexibility is more valuable than control. Repeat internally. Daily English fluency also includes humorous storytelling. For example, I remember once preparing extensively for a meeting, only to realize I had the wrong date. It was embarrassing at the moment, but amusing in hindsight. Notice light emotional shift. Practice continuation. Moments like that remind me not to take myself too seriously. Repeat slowly. Now let's move into social experience. Storytelling. Someone asks, "How was the gathering you attended?" You might say, "It was refreshing. I reconnected with people I hadn't spoken to in years, and the conversations felt genuine rather than superficial." Notice emotional authenticity. Practice expansion. It reminded me how meaningful real connections can be. Repeat internally. At the B1 to B2 level, describing environments also enhances storytelling. For example, the atmosphere was warm and inviting, filled with laughter, shared memories, and a sense of comfort. Notice sensory layering. Practice descriptive continuation. It felt like time had slowed down for a while. Repeat slowly. Let's enter a guided extended storytelling drill, combining setting, emotion, and reflection. There was an evening not too long ago When I found myself sitting alone after a long day, reflecting on everything that had unfolded over the past months. The silence wasn't heavy, it was peaceful, almost necessary. It gave me space to process lessons, acknowledge growth, and release lingering stress. Repeat internally in paced segments. Continue. In that quiet moment, I realized how far I'd come, not just in achievements, but in mindset, resilience, and emotional awareness. Notice reflective layering. Daily conversations also include discussing inspiration. For example, I often draw inspiration from everyday people who remain committed to their goals despite challenges. Repeat slowly. Practice continuation. Consistency impresses me more than talent alone. Repeat internally. Now imagine discussing a turning point experience. Someone asks, "Was there a moment that changed your perspective significantly?" You might respond, "Yes, there was a conversation that shifted how I viewed failure. It reframed mistakes as stepping stones rather than setbacks." Notice metaphor framing. Practice reflection. That shift removed much of the fear I used to carry. Repeat slowly. Before moving further, let's complete an integrated fluency rehearsal, centered on experiential storytelling. Life has a way of teaching lessons through moments we least expect. Some experiences arrive quietly, without announcement, yet leave permanent imprints on our perspective. When we pause to reflect on them, we begin to see growth not as sudden transformation, but as a series of small awakenings unfolding over time. Repeat internally, focusing on calm narrative pacing. As your fluency continues to strengthen, another essential conversational layer begins to take shape, and that is your ability to express opinions, perspectives, and personal viewpoints with clarity and balance. At the B1 to B2 level, conversations are no longer limited to describing experiences. They often move toward discussing beliefs, preferences, social observations, and lifestyle philosophies. This type of communication requires not only vocabulary, but also emotional intelligence and structural fluency. Imagine someone asking you, "What's your opinion on maintaining work-life balance?" Instead of giving a short response, you expand thoughtfully. "I believe work-life balance isn't just a luxury, it's a necessity for long-term well-being. When one area dominates excessively, it tends to affect mental clarity and emotional stability." Notice the abstract framing and cause-effect language. Let's move into guided speak-in practice. Listen first. Productivity is important, but without rest and reflection, it becomes unsustainable. Now repeat mentally or aloud, focusing on the contrast between productivity and sustainability. This is common in advanced opinion discourse. Now imagine discussing technology's role in daily life. Someone asks, "Do you think technology has made life easier?" A fluent response could sound like, "In many ways, yes. Technology has streamlined communication and access to information, but it has also introduced new distractions that require conscious management." Notice balanced perspective language. Practice expansion. Convenience has increased, but so has dependency. Repeat slowly. Opinion conversations often involve comparing lifestyles. For example, "I've noticed that fast-paced living can be energizing, yet emotionally draining if not balanced with mindful pauses." Notice contrast structuring. Practice continuation. Sustainable living requires intentional slowing down. Repeat internally. Let's explore discussions about social media habits. Someone asks, "How do you feel about social media influence?" You might respond, "I think social media can be inspiring when used mindfully, but overwhelming when consumed without boundaries." Notice conditional framing. Practice deeper reflection. It amplifies both positivity and pressure simultaneously. Repeat slowly. Daily English fluency also includes expressing preferences diplomatically. For example, I tend to prefer smaller gatherings over large social events. They feel more personal and less exhausting. Notice preference softening. Practice expansion. Meaningful conversations matter more to me than crowded environments. Repeat internally. Now imagine discussing learning styles. Someone asks, "Do you learn better alone or in groups?" A fluent answer might sound like, "I benefit from both." Independent learning allows deep focus, while group discussions expose me to perspectives I might overlook. Notice dual balance structuring. Practice continuation. Each approach complements the other. Repeat slowly. Let's move into habit-building opinion conversations. For example, I've come to believe that consistency outweighs intensity when it comes to personal growth. Notice philosophical phrasing. Practice elaboration. Small, repeated actions accumulate into meaningful transformation. Repeat internally. Now imagine discussing morning routines. Someone asks, "Do you think morning routines really matter?" You might respond, "Absolutely." How you begin your day often sets the emotional tone for everything that follows. Notice causal framing. Practice expansion. A grounded start creates mental clarity. Repeat slowly. At the B1 to B2 level, conversations also include debating productivity culture. For example, there's a growing pressure to be constantly productive, but I think rest should be viewed as part of productivity rather than its opposite. Notice reframing language. Practice continuation. Recovery fuels. Performance. Repeat internally. Let's explore conversations about personal priorities. Someone asks, "What do you prioritize most at this stage of life?" You might say, "I prioritize peace of mind, steady growth, and meaningful relationships over external recognition." Notice value articulation. Practice deeper reflection. Fulfillment feels more important than validation. Repeat slowly. Now imagine discussing financial lifestyle choices. For example, I've started valuing financial stability more than impulsive spending. It provides a sense of long-term security. Notice maturity framing. Practice continuation. Freedom often comes from disciplined choices. Repeat internally. Daily life conversations also involve discussing change. Someone asks, "Do you think people can truly change?" You might respond, "I believe people can evolve significantly, but genuine change usually requires self-awareness and sustained effort." Notice conditional belief framing. Practice elaboration. Transformation begins with honest reflection. Repeat slowly. Now let's move into an extended opinion roleplay designed to stretch conversational endurance. Imagine discussing personal development philosophies. I've come to realize that growth isn't always visible externally. Sometimes the most profound progress happens internally, in how we think, react, and process experiences. That kind of growth may go unnoticed by others, but it reshapes how we navigate life. Repeat internally in segments. Continue the reflection. It's less about becoming someone new and more about becoming aligned with who you truly are. Notice identity alignment language. Let's explore discussions around success definitions. Someone asks, "What does success mean to you now?" You might respond, "Success, to me, means living in alignment with my values, maintaining inner stability, and continuing to evolve without losing authenticity." Repeat slowly. Practice deeper articulation. Achievement without fulfillment feels incomplete. Repeat internally. Now imagine debating comfort versus challenge. For example, comfort provides stability, but challenge drives expansion. Both are necessary in balanced proportions. Notice dual necessity framing. Practice expansion. Growth requires periods of discomfort. Repeat slowly. Daily English fluency also includes discussing time perception. Someone asks, "Do you feel time is moving faster these days?" You might say, "Yes, I think modern lifestyles accelerate our perception of time, which is why intentional pauses has become more important than ever." Notice reflective observation. Practice continuation. Mindfulness slows emotional time. Repeat internally. Before we continue, let's complete an integrated opinion fluency rehearsal, combining belief, reflection, and philosophical framing. I've learned that perspectives shape experiences. Two people can face the same situation, yet interpret it entirely differently. That's why cultivating balanced thinking, emotional awareness, and reflective understanding plays such a crucial role in personal development and communication. Repeat mentally, focusing on thoughtful pacing. As your conversational fluency continues to expand into more advanced territory, another vital dimension of daily life, English conversations begins to develop, and that is your ability to discuss health, lifestyle, and personal well-being in a reflective and expressive way. At the B1 to B2 level, these conversations move beyond simple statements like, "I exercise," or "I eat healthy." Instead, they involve describing habits, motivations, struggles, and long-term intentions connected to physical and mental balance. Imagine someone asking you, "Have you been taking care of your health lately?" A fluent response might sound like this: "I've been making a conscious effort to prioritize my well-being, not just physically, but mentally as well. I realized that sustainable productivity depends heavily on how well you take care of yourself." Notice the phrase conscious effort and the connection between productivity and health. Let's move into guided speaking practice. Listen first. I've started incorporating small but consistent habits into my routine, things that support both my energy and clarity. Now repeat mentally or aloud, focusing on incorporating small habits and support my energy and clarity. These are common wellness conversation structures. Daily conversations often involve discussing exercise routines. Someone might ask, "Do you work out regularly?" Instead of saying, "Yes," you could expand, "I try to stay active whenever possible." It's not always intense exercise. Sometimes it's just light movement to keep my body engaged. Notice flexibility framing. Practice expansion. Consistency matters more to me than intensity. Repeat slowly. Now imagine discussing motivation challenges. Someone asks, "How do you stay motivated to exercise?" You might respond, there are days when motivation feels low, but I remind myself that discipline carries me further than temporary enthusiasm. Notice discipline framing, practice continuation. Even minimal effort is better than inactivity. Repeat internally. Health conversations also include discussing mental well-being. For example, I've been paying closer attention to my mental state lately, ensuring that I give myself time to decompress after demanding days. Notice emotional self-awareness. Practice deeper reflection. Mental rest is just as vital as physical rest. Repeat slowly. Let's shift into lifestyle balance conversations. Someone asks, how do you manage stress? A fluent answer could sound like, I try to identify the source of stress first, then address it calmly rather than reacting impulsively. Notice problem-solving structure. Practice expansion. Reflection helps me respond rather than react. Repeat internally. Now imagine discussing sleep habits. Someone asks, have you improved your sleep routine? You might respond, I've been working on it. I realized that quality sleep directly impacts my focus, mood, and productivity. Notice cause-effect linkage. Practice continuation. Rest is an investment, not a luxury. Repeat slowly. Daily English fluency also involves discussing dietary choices. For example, I've been trying to eat more mindfully, paying attention to what fuels my body rather than just what satisfies cravings. Notice mindful consumption framing. Practice expansion. Nourishment affects not only energy, but emotional stability as well. Repeat internally. Now imagine discussing digital detox habits. Someone asks, do you ever take breaks from screens? A fluent response might be, yes. I've realized that constant digital exposure can feel mentally cluttering, so I intentionally disconnect whenever I need clarity. Notice mentally cluttering. Practice continuation. Silence helps me reset internally. Repeat slowly. At the B1 to B2 level, conversations also include discussing burnout. For example, there was a period when I felt completely burned out, not physically exhausted, but mentally depleted. Notice emotional differentiation. Practice reflection. That phase taught me the importance of pacing myself. Repeat internally. Let's move into wellness habit. Storytelling. Someone asks, what changes have improved your lifestyle the most? You might respond, introducing structured routines made the biggest difference. Simple habits that gradually transformed my daily rhythm. Notice transformation framing. Practice expansion. Structure created stability. Repeat slowly. Now imagine discussing relaxation techniques. For example, I've started engaging in quiet reflection during evenings. It helps me release accumulated tension from the day. Notice emotional decompression language. Practice continuation. Stillness restores perspective. Repeat internally. Daily conversations also involve discussing social wellness. Someone asks, do social interactions affect your energy? You might respond, they do. Meaningful interactions energize me, while superficial ones tend to drain my focus. Notice emotional distinction. Practice deeper articulation. Connection quality matters more than quantity. Repeat slowly. Let's enter an extended guided wellness reflection drill, combining physical, mental, and emotional balance. Over time, I've come to understand that well-being isn't built through sudden transformation, but through steady alignment of habits, small choices repeated consistently, nourishing both body and mind. When energy, clarity, and emotional balance begin to harmonize, life feels more sustainable and grounded. Repeat internally in segments. Continue. I no longer view self-care as optional. I see it as foundational to everything else I pursue. Notice value prioritization language. Now imagine discussing overcoming unhealthy habits. Someone asks, was it difficult to change old routines? You might say, initially, yes. Habits rooted in comfort are hard to break, but awareness was the first step toward transformation. Repeat, slowly. Practice continuation. Progress replaced perfection as my focus. Repeat internally. Daily English fluency also includes discussing environmental influence on lifestyle. For example, I've noticed that my surroundings significantly impact habits. Peaceful environments encourage mindful living. Notice environment-behavior linkage. Practice expansion. Atmosphere shapes mindset. Repeat slowly. Before we move further, let's complete an integrated lifestyle fluency rehearsal, combining wellness philosophy and reflective insight. I've realized that health extends far beyond physical fitness. It includes mental clarity, emotional resilience, social balance, and spiritual calmness. When these dimensions align, life doesn't just feel productive, it feels purposeful, steady, and deeply fulfilling. Repeat mentally, focusing on calm pacing and emotional resonance. As your conversational fluency continues to mature and expand into broader real-life context, another important dimension begins to develop naturally, and that is your ability to talk about travel, planning experiences, cultural exposure, and future exploration. At the B1 to B2 level, these conversations move far beyond simply stating where you went. They begin to include emotional impressions, logistical planning, personal reflections, and the deeper value of stepping outside familiar environments. Imagine someone asking you, do you enjoy traveling? Instead of giving a short answer, you might respond, I do. I find that traveling offers more than just a change of scenery. It provides perspective. It challenges comfort zones, and it exposes you to ways of life you might never encounter otherwise. Notice how this response connects travel with personal growth. Let's move into guided speaking practice. Listen first. Every new place I visit leaves me with lessons I didn't anticipate. Now repeat mentally or aloud, focusing on lessons I didn't anticipate. This reflective phrasing elevates conversational storytelling. Now imagine discussing travel planning. Someone asks, how do you usually plan your trips? A fluent response could sound like, I like to strike a balance between structure and spontaneity. I outline the essentials, but I leave room for unexpected discoveries along the way. Notice strike a balance and unexpected discoveries. Practice expansion. Overplanning can limit the magic of exploration. Repeat slowly. Daily life conversations also involve discussing travel challenges. For example, traveling isn't always seamless. There are delays, miscommunications, and logistical hurdles, but those moments often become stories you laugh about later. Notice reframing inconvenience as experience. Practice continuation. Discomfort sometimes enriches the journey. Repeat internally. Let's shift into cultural exposure conversations. Someone asks, What do you enjoy most about visiting new cultures? You might respond, I enjoy observing how people live, how they communicate, and what they value. It broadens my understanding of human connection. Notice observational fluency. Practice deeper reflection. Cultural immersion reshapes assumptions. Repeat slowly. Now imagine discussing language learning through travel. For example, being in an environment where English is spoken naturally accelerates fluency. It forces you to think and respond in real time. Notice immersion learning framing. Practice continuation. Exposure builds confidence faster than isolation. Repeat internally. At the B1 to B2 level, conversations also include travel memory storytelling. Someone asks, what's the most memorable trip you've had? A fluent response might sound like, one journey that stayed with me was a solo trip I took. It wasn't just about the destination, it was about discovering independence and inner resilience. Notice emotional transformation language. Practice elaboration. Solitude often reveals strength. Repeat slowly. Now imagine discussing travel fears. Someone asks, do you ever feel nervous traveling alone? You might respond, initially, yes. Unfamiliar environments can feel intimidating, but once you adapt, the confidence you gain is unmatched. Notice emotional progression. Practice continuation. Courage grows through exposure. Repeat internally. Daily English conversations also include discussing dream destinations. For example, there are still many places I hope to explore, locations that carry historical depth and cultural richness. Notice aspirational phrasing. Practice expansion. Travel, for me, is both education and inspiration. Repeat slowly. Let's move into travel planning logistics. Someone asks, do you prefer detailed itineraries or flexible plans? You might say, I appreciate having a framework, but I resist overscheduling. Flexibility allows authentic experiences to unfold. Notice planning philosophy language. Practice continuation. Freedom enhances exploration. Repeat internally. Now imagine discussing post-travel reflection. For example, returning home after traveling often shifts my perspective. I begin to appreciate familiar routines more deeply. Notice contrast reflection. Practice deeper insight. Distance renews appreciation. Repeat slowly. Let's enter an extended guided travel storytelling drill, combining planning, experience, and reflection. There was a journey I embarked on not long ago, one that began with simple curiosity, but unfolded into something far more transformative. I encountered unfamiliar streets, new conversations, and moments of quiet introspection that reshaped how I viewed both the world and myself. Repeat internally in paced segments. Continue. It reminded me that growth often occurs when we step beyond the boundaries of comfort and certainty. Notice philosophical travel reflection. Now let's shift into conversations about future aspirations linked to exploration. Someone asks, what motivates your desire to travel more? You might respond, I feel there's so much to learn beyond textbooks and routines. Experiences offer lessons that theory cannot replicate. Notice experiential learning framing. Practice continuation. Exposure cultivates empathy. Repeat slowly. Daily fluency also includes discussing lifestyle inspiration drawn from travel. For example, traveling has influenced how I structure my life. I've adopted habits and perspectives from cultures that prioritize balance and mindfulness. Notice cross-cultural influence language. Practice expansion. Global exposure refines personal values. Repeat internally. Now imagine discussing meaningful encounters while traveling. Someone asks, "Have you met anyone who left an impression on you during your travels?" You might say, "Yes, conversations with strangers often leave lasting insights." Sometimes wisdom arrives from the most unexpected sources. Notice reflective human connection phrasing. Practice continuation. Shared stories dissolve cultural distance. Repeat slowly. Before we continue, let's complete an integrated fluency rehearsal centered on travel philosophy, cultural awareness, and personal evolution. Travel has taught me that the world is far more interconnected than it appears. Despite differences in language, customs, and routines, human emotions remain universally familiar. Curiosity bridges gaps, empathy deepens understanding, and every journey, whether physical or internal, contributes to the unfolding story of who we become. Repeat mentally, focusing on calm pacing and reflective tone. As your conversational fluency approaches a more advanced and self-sustaining level, the nature of your daily life conversations begins to shift once again. You are no longer just describing the present or reflecting on the past. You are also articulating vision, purpose, direction, and the deeper motivations that guide your decisions and behaviors. At the B1 to B2 level, being able to express where you see yourself heading, how you interpret your journey, and what kind of life you are consciously shaping becomes an essential component of real-world English communication. Imagine someone asking you, "Where do you see yourself evolving over the next few years?" Instead of offering a vague or uncertain answer, you might respond, "I see myself continuing to grow in ways that go beyond professional milestones. I want to cultivate emotional intelligence, strengthen my communication skills, and maintain a balanced relationship with both ambition and inner peace." Notice how this response blends external and internal growth dimensions. Let's move into guided speaking practice. Listen first. I'm less focused on chasing outcomes and more focused on becoming someone capable of handling those outcomes responsibly. Now repeat mentally or aloud, paying attention to the reflective pacing of becoming someone capable. This type of phrasing demonstrates forward-thinking maturity. Daily conversations often involve discussing purpose. Someone might ask, "What drives you to keep improving?" A fluent response could sound like, "I think what drives me most is the desire to evolve, not out of pressure, but out of curiosity about what I'm capable of becoming." Notice the intrinsic motivation framing. Practice continuation. Growth feels meaningful when it comes from within. Repeat slowly. Now imagine discussing long-term fulfillment. For example, "I've started redefining what fulfillment means to me. It's less about accumulation and more about alignment with my values." Notice philosophical framing. Practice deeper articulation. Living authentically feels more rewarding than impressing others. Repeat internally. At the B1 to B2 level, conversations also expand into legacy thinking. Someone asks, "How do you want to be remembered?" You might respond, "I would hope to be remembered as someone who remained grounded, someone who pursued growth while uplifting others along the way. Notice character-based legacy language, practice continuation. Impact matters more to me than recognition. Repeat slowly. Let's shift into conversations about overcoming fear of the future. Someone asks, do you ever feel uncertain about what lies ahead? You might say, of course. Uncertainty is a natural part of any evolving journey, but I've learned to view it as possibility rather than threat. Notice reframing uncertainty. Practice expansion. The unknown often carries opportunity. Repeat internally. Now imagine discussing patience with progress. For example, I've come to accept that meaningful progress unfolds gradually. Rushing growth often compromises depth. Notice process awareness. Practice continuation. Time refines transformation. Repeat slowly. Daily life fluency also includes discussing adaptability to life transitions. Someone asks, how do you handle major life changes? You might respond, I try to approach change with openness rather than resistance. Transitions often redirect us toward unexpected growth. Notice transition, reframing, practice deeper reflection. Adaptability determines resilience. Repeat internally. Let's enter an extended guided future vision storytelling drill, combining aspiration, reflection, and emotional grounding. There was a time when I viewed the future with anxiety, constantly trying to predict outcomes and secure certainty. But over time, I began to understand that life unfolds more gracefully when approached with trust rather than control. That shift in perspective transformed how I plan, how I respond, and how I grow. Repeat internally in paced segments. Continue. I still set goals. I still pursue direction, but I allow space for evolution along the way. Notice balance framing between intention and surrender. Now imagine discussing contribution and influence. Someone asks, what kind of influence do you hope to have on others? You might respond, I hope to inspire growth through authenticity, not perfection. I believe people connect more deeply with honesty than with flawlessness. Notice relational influence language. Practice continuation. Shared vulnerability builds genuine connection. Repeat slowly. At the B1 to B2 level, conversations also include reflecting on personal transformation over time. For example, when I look back at who I used to be, I see someone driven by urgency and external validation. Now, I feel more centered, more patient, and more aligned with my inner direction. Notice transformation comparison. Practice deeper articulation. Growth reshapes identity quietly. Repeat internally. Now imagine discussing lessons learned through hardship. Someone asks, what has struggle taught you? You might respond, struggle taught me endurance, perspective, and gratitude for stability. It revealed strengths I didn't know I possessed. Notice strength discovery framing. Practice. Continuation. Adversity refines character. Repeat slowly. Daily conversations also involve discussing hope. For example, despite challenges, I remain hopeful about what lies ahead, not because I expect ease, but because I trust my ability to navigate difficulty. Notice grounded optimism. Practice expansion. Confidence grows through lived resilience. Repeat internally. Let's move into philosophical life reflections. Someone asks, what have you learned most about life recently? You might respond, I've learned that peace is cultivated internally, not found externally. Circumstances fluctuate, but inner grounding sustains stability. Notice philosophical fluency. Practice continuation. Stillness clarifies direction. Repeat slowly. Now let's complete the final extended fluency endurance drill. Integrating vision, reflection, resilience, and purpose language into one continuous narrative. As I continue moving forward in life, I no longer measure progress solely by achievements. I measure it by awareness, by emotional strength, by the clarity with which I navigate uncertainty. The journey ahead remains unwritten, yet I feel prepared to meet it with openness, courage, and steady intention. Growth, I've realized, is not a destination, but an ongoing unfolding, shaped by choices, reflections, and the willingness to evolve beyond former limitations. Repeat internally, focusing on calm pacing and emotional resonance. Thank you so much for spending this time with me and being part of this advanced English practice session. I truly hope this masterclass helped you feel more confident, more expressive, and more comfortable using English in your daily life conversations. Remember, fluency isn't built overnight. It grows through consistency, patience, and the courage to keep speaking, even when you're unsure. Every phrase you practice, every sentence you attempt, and every conversation you engage in is shaping your progress in powerful ways. Keep revisiting these practice moments. Repeat the expressions, adapt them to your own life situations, and most importantly, allow yourself the freedom to make mistakes while learning. Because that is where real improvement begins. If you found this session helpful, make sure to subscribe to the channel and press the bell icon so you never miss our daily English learning lessons. I'll continue guiding you through more advanced conversations, real-life practice, and fluency-building masterclasses designed to help you speak naturally and confidently. Until next time, keep practicing, keep growing, and keep believing in your ability to become a fluent English speaker.